All right, juniors, we are going to tackle probably my favorite part of this unit, which is going to be a section of crisis number one, or your book calls it the American crisis, but great little pamphlet by one of my favorite. I don't know if you call him a founding father. He definitely influenced him greatly, but I don't think he's considered part of the group. It's a guy named Thomas Paine, who, thanks to that musical Hamilton, seen a resurgence in people giving a hoot about him. But a really important guy. I believe that the book Common Sense and then this part of this pamphlet from the American Crisis is really what caused the Americans to find, or the British people at the time, to finally declare war on England and go start the Revolutionary War and eventually form the country that would become where we live now, the United States. So I feel like the persuasive techniques he uses are amazing. I could easily see if you were on the other side hating this guy because he definitely is inflammatory at some instances, but amazing person. Looking into his biography is interesting. If you would like to do something, this isn't going to be something we'll test on, but it's worth looking into if you find this interesting or you're really enjoy learning about history. Thomas Paine's a phenomenal guy. Not a great ending to his life. If I remember right, Thomas Paine's one of the people who they've lost his body. They don't know where it is. So didn't have the greatest end. Made the mistake of stepping on some religious toes. Wrote some things that were anti-religious in his later years and caused himself some issues, but still considered a heroic person in American history. So we're going to read this. It's not very long. It's on page 117, and it goes through 118 and part of 119. So we might as well tackle it, kind of talk about it as I read it, as if we were teaching it in class, for those of you at home who don't have access to class. So here we go. Because these are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us. At the heart of the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. 'Tis dearness only that gives everything its value. Now let's look at this little chunk right here because there are so many quotable things right away. The fact that he uses two phrases. He says the summer soldier and the sunshine patriot. Those things are, that first line is one of the things that's most memorable about this. But those two lines, what he's saying is the person who's only in it for the good times. The person who's all about rebellion until the fighting starts, or the person who's all about a cause until it's going to cost them something. So he's saying those people are going to shrink in the upcoming fight. And he's basically letting them know that hard times are on the way. But he also points out this is going to be a hard battle, but he says that things that are easy aren't valued, and that, that it's the difficulty that gives something value. So he's letting these people know that, hey, look, we're going to struggle. This fight is going to be tough. It's against insurmountable odds, but it's going to be worth it when we win. And that's, that is a powerful persuasive technique, basically acknowledging that we're probably, our chance, he doesn't say they're not going to win. In fact, he indicates that they are going to in his mind, but he does also indicate that this is going to be tough. He's not going to lie and tell people this is going to be an easy, 2-day fight and we're going to have it won. He's indicating that bad times are on the way, but they're going to be worth it. He says, heaven knows how it is to set a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. Britain, with an army to enforce her tyranny, has declared that she has a right not only to tax, but to bind us in all cases whatsoever. And if being bound in that manner is not slavery, then there is no such thing as slavery upon earth. Even the expression is impious, for so unlimited a power can belong only to God. So again, really quick, he does the same thing we saw with Patrick Henry, where they compare, servitude to the British as slavery. Now, again, kind of unfair, kind of would not be the most, that's one of my favorite subreddit says, this is kind of aged like milk. All right. The usage of slavery here is very much so frowned upon today because obviously there was legitimate slavery there. Not, having to bow down to an oppressive government. There was legitimate slavery in the colonies. And so that statement is a little unfortunate today, but he does show how much they disliked the idea of British rule. He also uses those quotes there at the bottom of 117. Those are from things that British actually would have said about having the ability to tax them and also bind them in whatever case. In other words, they had no kind of court system. If we wanted to bust you for something, you could be busted for something. So obviously, that's not fair, and it kind of aggravated the colonists. Let's keep going. He says, um, he says, whether the independence of the continent was declared too soon or delayed too long, I will not now enter into an argument. As my own simple opinion is that had it been 8 months earlier, it would have been much better. This is a Thomas Paine thing that I love. He's like, look, I'm not going to get into the fight about whether we should have done this sooner and we would have been in better shape. But just for the record, I think we should have done this sooner and we'd have been in better shape. That's a very Thomas Paine thing to do. Like I said, he could be inflammatory. He could aggravate you if he was on the opposite side of you. He upset a lot of people in his lifetime, but you know what? The polite people don't get a lot done when it comes to this sort of thing. So, sorry, polite people. He says, I once felt all that kind of anger which a man ought to feel against the mean principles that are held by the Tories. By the way, if you look at the bottom, Tories are just the loyalists, okay? There's a noted one who kept a tavern at Amboy was standing at his door with a pretty child in his hand, about 8 or 9 years old, as most I ever saw, and after speaking his mind as freely as he thought was prudent, finished with this unfatherly expression, well, give me peace in my day. Not a man lives on the continent but fully believes that a separation must sometime or other finally take place, and a generous parent would have said, if there must be trouble, let it be in my day that my child may have peace. And this single reflection, well applied, is sufficient to awaken every man to his duty. I love that. He's going to do something that we don't see in the Patrick Henry speech, and we obviously didn't see much of any of in the Declaration of Independence. And the point here is to use an anecdote, a personal story here. He talks about seeing this loyalist with their kid, and the loyalist was like, well, he wanted peace in his day. He was what our country does now, kicking the bucket down to the next generation. He was like, I want peace now in my day so I can raise my children in peace. Our idea about the deficit. We're like, well, we'll just keep borrowing money and eventually something will happen. And yeah, eventually our children or our grandchildren or their children are going to end up with that bill. But he says a good father, and man, this is some of Thomas Paine's wit. He says a good father would say, let's have war in my day and peace in my child's day. Which that's one of those techniques that, like, how do you argue with that? How do you say, no, you're wrong? Let my kid fight the battles for me. You don't do that. So, I mean, at that point, again, he would have really had his opponents in a vice because the point he made is really, you can't argue against it. All right. He says, not a place upon earth might be so happy as America. Her situation is remote from all the wrangling world, and she has nothing to do but to trade with them. A man may easily distinguish in himself between temper and principle, and I am as confident as I am that God governs the world, that America will never be happy till she gets clear of foreign dominion. Wars without ceasing will break out till that period arrives, and the continent must in the end be conqueror, for though the flame of liberty may sometimes cease to shine, the coal can never expire. I love the analogies and the metaphors and just his figurative language. He's poetic. Thomas Paine is much more poetic than any of the other people we've studied. And he's much more poetic than Phyllis Wheatley, who wrote literal poetry. We're going to see her tomorrow. But I mean, his writing is phenomenal. This idea of, the flame of liberty sometimes may cease to shine, but the coal can never expire. And you think about a fire, about, fires go out, but if you've made the mistake of reaching into a fire when the coal is still white or gray, you burned yourself pretty badly. All right. So he's pointing out that you may be able to put it off for a little while, but until we finally pull the trigger on this war, the little skirmishes are going to keep coming up. We're never going to be at peace until we finally have this war. And that's kind of the point he's making. And again, he's not wrong, but using clever little sentences that are very quotable, like the one about liberty, the flame of liberty, is a brilliant technique. Thomas Paine is just a genius. All right, really big paragraph coming up, so you can imagine this is an important one. So America did not, nor does not want force, but she wanted a proper application of that force. Wisdom is not the purchase of a day. Let me move this a little closer. I'm hoping that it's been recording. Okay. Wisdom is not the purchase of a day, and it is no wonder that we should err at first sitting off. From an excess of tenderness, we were unwilling to raise an army and trusted our cause to the temporary defense of a well-meaning militia. A summer's experience has now taught us better. Yet with those troops, while they were collected, we were able to set bounding on the progress of the enemy, and thank God they are again assembling. So he's pointing out some of their mistakes they made, and he's saying, we've learned from these. Now we know what really needs to be done. You can't be halfway in. You got to go all the way. Now you notice we got the ellipsis, the dot 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 there, and then right before the next paragraph, got a dot dot dot. So we're missing some sections that weren't put in the book. Okay, so there's a lot more to this than what we're reading. That turn with the warm ardor of a friend to those who have nobly stood and are yet determined to stand this matter out. I call not upon a few, but upon all, not on this state or that state, but on every state, up and help us. Lay your shoulders to the wheel. Better have too much force than too little, when so great an object is at stake. Let it be told to the future world that in the depth of winter, when nothing but hope and virtue could survive, that the city and the country, alarmed at one common danger, came forth to meet and to repulse it. Say not that thousands are gone, turn out your tens of thousands. Throw not the burden of the day upon providence, but show your faith by your works, that God may bless you. Now, I love this. He's really combating all of the arguments against fighting. He's like, we're not going to do this halfway. We're going to not send out thousands. We're going to send out tens of thousands. He says, we're not going to trust in God. But, that's going to be an element of it, but he says that we're going to show our faith by our works. And again, he's quoting things there. So he's trying to tell them that it's not enough to just sit and wait for God to save us. We need to get out and show that we're willing to take this step so that he can, in turn, bless us. Okay, you can imagine this is like getting to the peak of his argument. All right, excuse me, coffee. It's the afternoon. I'm on fumes. It matters not where you live or what rank of life you hold. The evil or the blessing will reach you all. The far and the near, the home counties and the back, the rich and the poor shall suffer or rejoice alike. The heart that feels not now is dead. The blood of his children shall curse his cowardice, who shrinks back at a time when a little might have saved the whole and made them happy. So notice here, it's not just we need to get into this full on. He's basically saying if you don't get behind the program here, then you're a coward, and your children are going. Your future blood will curse you for your cowardice. I mean, this guy is not leaving. I mean, this is a like rousing speech before a football or at the halftime of a football game when you're down by 3 touchdowns. I mean, this guy is really hammering this home. Okay. He says, I love the man that can smile in trouble, that can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. It is the business of little minds to shrink, but he whose heart is firm and whose conscience approves his conduct will pursue his principles unto death. So it's like if you really believe what you say you believe, then you will pursue it until it costs you. This is something we don't have today. A lot of people say a lot of stuff about how they feel about their faith or about their beliefs, but honestly, the first time they're really tested with anything that could inconvenience you, a lot of us buckle and give up. So I mean, it's really tough to watch this. I mean, we live in an area or in a time where we're blessed. We don't have to fight for things as much as we would have once. I mean, in fact, we really don't. You see a little bit here and there of people getting into any kind of arguments that turn into fighting. But for the most part, we just, you live in a country where we're blessed. We can believe what we want. We can think what we want. And we don't have to fight for our rights to have those opinions. If we ever did, I think a lot of you would cave in. I feel like a lot of people would immediately get behind whatever program is being sold to you that you have to believe. And we would be, okay, well, that's fine. I'll believe that. It's not a big deal to me anyway. I've seen people cave in on things all the time. You see it with students, all through high school. I have these beliefs. I'm a Christian. I really believe this is what makes, what life is about. And then they get to college and, a semester in and they've completely abandoned their principles. And that's not good. I mean, Thomas Paine's commenting on it here, and here we see it hundreds of years later. So very different type of thing, but really, in all honesty, it's not. All right. Okay, let's finish up. Because my own line of reasoning is to myself as straight and clear as a ray of light. Not all the treasures of the world, so far as I believe, could have induced me to support an offensive war, for I think it murder. But if a thief breaks into my house, burns and destroys my property, and kills or threatens to kill me, or those that are in it, and to bind me in all cases whatsoever to his absolute will, am I to suffer it? What signifies it to me whether he who does it is a king or a common man, my countrymen or not my countrymen, whether it is done by an individual villain or an army of them? If we reason to the root of things, we shall find no difference. Neither can any cause be assigned why we should punish in the one case and pardon in the other. And I love that paragraph. This whole thing's been a paragraph, but that little section of the paragraph where he points out, like, he's using so much. If you go back to our appeals, this is an appeal to logic. He's saying, look, if someone threatened, he says, I don't believe in offensive war. I wouldn't have started it because that's murder. And that's a great statement. That he deals with all the pacifists. He's handling them. But he says if someone was to break into my house and threaten my family or to take my stuff, and then he uses that bind me what in whatever case necessary. He uses that phrase again. But he says, then I'm going to fight back. And he says, what does it matter if it's a king or like a robber? What does it matter if it's one person or an army? He says it's still, the action is still occurring. Therefore, we have to fight. I mean, this is the most persuasive, I don't want to say the most, but it's one of the most persuasive speeches or writings I've ever seen, especially to get people to do something that is really unpopular. You have to realize that there was a like fraction of a percentage of a chance we were going to beat the British. Okay, I mean this was a lost cause before they started it, but I mean Thomas Paine is convincing people to jump on board and possibly, more than likely, lose your life. If nothing else, go through a period of complete chaos, even if we did win. While everything was kind of getting late in, and it wasn't like the government was ready the next day after the Revolutionary War was over, and we just jumped into being the United States of America. I mean, there was a period of chaos that occurred, and great things came out of it, but you had to endure the chaos. So, I mean, he's not asking people for something small here. All right, last paragraph. Again, we have the ellipsis, so we're going to skip some. So there are cases which cannot be overdone by language, and this is one. There are persons, too, who see not the full extent of the evil that threatens them. They solace themselves with hopes that the enemy, if they succeed, will be merciful. It is the madness or of folly to expect mercy from those who refuse to do justice. And even mercy, where conquest is the object, is only a trick of war. The cunning of the fox is as murderous as the violence of the wolf, and we ought to guard equally against both. That's a great final sentence there. But he's pointing out that there's a lot of people that think, well, if we lose, maybe the British will be merciful. And he's like, they're not. So, if we're going to go to war, everybody has to get on board. Even if you weren't really for it, you still need to go, because if we lose, they're not going to take mercy on us. They're going to punish us harsher and put a bunch of people are going to be hanged. It's going to be a bad thing. And I like the imagery here. He uses a lot of, like, again, symbolic and poetic imagery when he says things like, the cunning of the fox is as murderous as the violence of the wolf. Again, the cunning of the fox is, something that's, tricking you versus the out and out violence of the wolf. And he's saying they're both bad. It doesn't matter which of the two we're going to get. So, let's get on the program and let's fight this. And that's what he's saying. And you know what? If I was alive in that time period, he'd have had me sold. I'd have jumped on board. Now it's easy for me to say that here in my comfortable chair, 2 centuries and change later. But, I would like to believe that this would be a convincing thing for me. I mean, it's powerful. It's some of the most powerful words that existed in this time period. And it definitely convinced a lot of people to, in fact, seek to do the impossible, which was for, a bunch of farmy hillbillies to overthrow the greatest power in the world at the time. So, powerful work. Thomas Paine's an amazing person. Lots of other work that he's contributed that have a lot of really important philosophical value. I encourage you to study some of his stuff. He's tremendous. You do have to take it slow because it is a little tough language. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that little part we got. Like I said, Thomas Paine's a hero of mine. His writing style is amazing. And we're studying this from a literary perspective, not so much a historical one, but seeing how he sets up his argument, the way he attacks those various appeals, like an appeal to logos, appeal to authority, appeal to the emotions. There's another one that I've just dropped for some reason, but there's another appeal. Let's see. Which one did I miss? Appeals to ethics. Those are all in there, and he uses them masterfully. So anyway, kind of a short unit, not short unit, but short lesson. There's not much to it. When we do it in class, we're going to spend a little more time discussing it, but we'll probably still finish within 20 to 30 minutes. So I hope this was useful. I hope you guys learned something from it. I hope those of you who are doing this from home are definitely watching these and getting in this conversation. Again, please email me if you've got some interesting points you want to make, or if you decide you want to come zoom in and watch this live, or even if you just have some questions. I'd love to hear from you. That goes for the kids who are doing this in class too. I know some of you aren't totally comfortable asking questions in class. Please don't let them go unanswered. Send me a message. Let's get a conversation going. Let's have some dialogue about this, because literature's no fun if it's not based on community and if we're not getting to discuss it. So, guys, I hope you have an awesome afternoon or evening. I'm doing this in the evening of Monday, so for me, it's evening. I'm about to pack up and head to the house and grade some more essays. So, thank you for your time, though, and you guys have a wonderful evening.